Welcome to the official Finovate podcast with Greg Palmer. In 2007, Finovate set out to create a dynamic fintech showcase featuring live 7-minute demos. For more than a decade, our global event series has brought together tens of thousands of people from across the fintech spectrum to see cutting-edge technologies. Now you can find out what goes on behind the scenes as key influencers and innovators share the stories that they don't get to tell you from stage. Here's a glimpse of what we have in store this episode.
And every human being has a unique conversational fingerprint, which is why we've gone beyond machine learning into deep learning, these independent, connected neural networks.
And now your host, Greg Palmer.
Hi, I'm here with Jeff Locastro of Neener Analytics. Jeff was one of the best of show winners at Finovate Spring 2019. If you weren't able to catch his video or see his demo in person, you can find it online at finovate.com/videos. But Jeff, for those of our audience who weren't able to watch you, tell us a little bit about what Neener Analytics does.
Hey, Greg, good to be here. Look, we look at it this way, is what if you could sit each customer down with a psychologist and just ask them, are you really going to pay us back? Because that's the question. The question is not can they, the question is will they? So we've automated financial risk decisioning. So using deep learning and AI, we've automated that psychologist. We've got two product lines, our click-based and our chat-based. Click-based is one click of the consumer's social media profile. The chat-based is as little as a 3-minute chat with Aria, which is the world's first augmented AI chat-based risk decisioning tool, and we are proud to say that it works every time.
Yeah, I think the chat-based tool is one you demoed there at Finovate Spring. And it's really interesting because you look at a lot of different types of information that traditional credit scoring doesn't take into account. And I think that's a really interesting question. Not can you pay us back, but will you pay us back? Are you the kind of person who's likely to pay us back? Can you tell me a little bit more about what types of indicators you look for that give you that idea, yes, this is a person who will pay back the loan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I could do that. And this is not trying to hide some intellectual property. It's that it's almost impossible to do that. The indicators we're looking at in a broad spectrum are not what the consumer is talking about, but rather how they talk about those things. And how they talk about whatever it is they're talking about is unique to that consumer. For example, if my co-founder Mark was here and you were interviewing him, he would talk about the company in a way that you would understand what we're talking about. Yep. But he would do it in a completely different way. Some of the messaging might be the same because we like to say the same things about certain things, but he would talk about it in a completely different way that is unique to him. It is his unique conversational fingerprint. And every human being has a unique conversational fingerprint, which is why we've gone beyond machine learning into deep learning, these independent, connected neural networks, kind of like doing it the way a human brain might understand and process into specific outcomes. So it's really hard, almost impossible to say, this is the indicator and this is the indicator that we're looking at, because it really is different in each scenario.
Sure. Yeah. And you have to go really in depth and really get into that personal aspect to it. And I think that personal side of it does allow you guys to reach out to a different group of people who have traditionally been excluded from financial services for any number of reasons. And this actually brings me to my next question. You guys kind of touch on a couple of different areas of fintech. You've got a lending component. There's obviously a financial inclusion component, a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence going on. How do you guys think of yourselves? What sort of bucket of fintech do you put yourselves into?
We like to say that we're not a different flavor of ice cream. We're a whole new food group. One of the things that we have difficulty doing, there's this 20-40 rule that I talk about. Whenever we're talking to somebody, it takes about 20 minutes before they go, okay, I think I know what you're talking about, and 40 before they say, oh, I think I get this. And the next 20, they have questions to ask. So we can't say we're the blank of blank. So the way we think of ourselves is, with us, everyone gets a risk profile because everyone has a risk profile. And that risk profile can be observed through every utterance, and every utterance correlates to a specific individual financial risk outcome in a very unique way that can be bifurcated into binary outcomes.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of fintech struggle with that, right? I think everybody would say we don't fit easily into a set category. And here's where, coming from a Finovate standpoint, our attendees would say, of course you're in a category. We want to put you into a neat little bucket so I can come up with my list at the end. We saw 8 demos on X, we saw 5 demos on Y, but the real world isn't like that. And I think from a fintech as an industry standpoint, we need to get past that idea that we have to cleanly categorize people and companies and really focus more on what it is that company can do. And here's again where you have a very interesting story to tell, because there's 2 really interesting components. On the one hand, you do have this financial inclusion aspect. You're making it possible for a large number of people to get loans and obtain money that they couldn't otherwise get. But on the other hand, you're taking a lot of deep data, tiny little data points that really get to the heart of who a person is. And you start to run into some privacy concerns at that point. How do you kind of juggle those 2 sides of the equation, the sort of feel good side with the potentially slightly scarier side?
I will say quickly here that when we were doing our first beta testing 3 or 4 years ago, one of the predictions that we had our first product, people were saying, that's really scary. How did you know that? Right. But they still click. They still went through the process. Right. So we're dealing with a situation where the consumer, we have an 87% global opt-in rate. Consumers want this. They want to be decisioned on the basis of who they are. The difference between small data and big data, and kind of how we get around this idea that we're becoming this repository is that we don't act like one. We don't store a database profiles. We don't store a database or even look at any of the application information provided by the consumer. So we have nothing in our databases right now that has Facebook profiles, for example, and the correlated financial information on the individual. We just don't have it. We don't want it. We never want to touch it. On the chat base, the same side. We're not storing those communications for future use. We don't do that. We're 100% analytics. We deliver a result in 15 seconds, 16 seconds, unless there's some kind of regulatory reason we have to hang on to something. 16 seconds later, it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I think I was initially thinking, is this an optimist test, right? Glass half full, glass half empty. Which side do you see it? But I think it may be actually something different from that. It might just be a question of how badly do you want it? Do you want the end goal enough? And I think that what you're able to offer to consumers does kind of outweigh the potential risk. And clearly they want it. They want the opportunity that you guys can offer to them.
Consumers want this. We're hardwired for small data, Greg. We're hardwired to move in these directions. And our opt-in rates demonstrate that people will do this for a known benefit to themselves.
Thanks for joining us on the Finovate podcast this week. Brought to you by the team behind Finovate and produced in association with Provoke Media. Make sure you tell your friends about the show, leave us a review on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to our show, and check out our upcoming events at finovate.com.